Good evening.
Good evening.
We haven't put a title for tonight, but we thought last week we had quite nice feedback and people seemed to enjoy it, where we'd started speaking about the difference between kind of seeing the deeper nature of the principles and personal insights that are helpful for us, and how easy it is to have an insight that helps your life and then start almost using it as a technique or almost a way to judge yourself by. So we kind of had a bit of a discussion around that, and it's been interesting because it's come up quite a lot in the calls we've been doing this week with different people, that it can be really easy to have an insight that helps your life and you feel totally kind of inspired by it, and then it starts being something to measure yourself against. So the example we used last week was that someone had said, I know I don't have to jump on every thought I have. But then that was a beautiful insight that really helped their life. They're like, wow, I was always just kind of going with whatever came to mind. I never knew I had any choice. But then it became, I shouldn't jump on the bad thoughts, or I shouldn't jump on the negative thought, or I shouldn't be able to do this. So you saw that something that actually in the moment was really helpful suddenly became a doing and something they had to remember and then ultimately beat themselves up about. And we've just been seeing it with everyone we've spoken to really this week around this subject. Something that's been helpful for them has then become almost a hindrance. And then we were speaking to Kelly today about there's a deeper nature to the principles that isn't personal. It's not about what we think or how we think. It's a deeper question about what creates reality, what creates this life. And the more that we kind of delve into that, the reordering that happens in our thinking in our personal life is incredible. But when we try and kind of mess around and control or manipulate personal thinking, then we just have stuff added to our mind and it seems to create more struggle rather than ease. And Sid wanted people to learn about these principles to bring more understanding, more love and more ease into their life. He didn't want it to become a therapy or a technique or an approach to use when they were feeling bad. So there's a couple of people that have messaged after that saying, wow, that really resonated. So that was our idea of what we might share a bit more about tonight. But if other people have things they'd like us to talk to or things that have come up for them, we would love to hear also.
Yeah, hi, Ange. Welcome, love. Yeah, I'm aware that Paul's on. Paul's new to this. Welcome to the cult, Paul. Yeah, I just want to give a bit of background because I think it's useful for everybody, really. It's a good reminder for all of us. What we try and bring to this world is something that Jenny and I have realised, and many people on this screen have realised. And it's a realisation of a new beginning. It's a realisation of something that already exists. So this isn't anything to add to ourselves at all. Never has been. In fact, that's where most of our trouble comes from, is we're trying to enhance ourselves. We're trying to make an old system, what appears to be an old system, better, without actually understanding what the hell the system ultimately is. So we do kind of things like go on self-help courses, we go and read books, and we do this and we do that, and affirmations, and we've got nothing against any of those things. They're brilliant in their own right. But we're missing something at that point. We're missing something at that level. And that something is who and what we are. That sounds, the moment you say that to most people, and if somebody was to say that before I kind of had any insight, I would instantly go to my character, my likes, my dislikes, my beliefs, my ideologies, my preferences, my prejudices. I'd start to talk to you about my personality, my ego. What we talk about was inspired by a man named Sydney Banks, who was a normal man, who was a welder who struggled in life, had arguments with his missus, like many of us do, had trouble in his relationships, had trouble in his personal life. He struggled in life. He struggled with anxiety. He was an unhappy man. He was a Scottish fella who lived in Canada. And one day he got speaking to a psychologist on some course he was on, and he said what he heard this psychologist say was, "You are not anxious, you just believe you are, you just think you are." And he said in that moment, he said it triggered something. And he said, "Do you understand what you've just said?" And he said, "Of course I do. I don't make idle chit chat." And he said, "No, do you understand what you've just said?" And after that, he went away and he said that he didn't sleep for 3 days and for 3 nights, as he had insight upon insight upon insight of realization into life. And then not long after that, he heard his wife and his mother, correct me at any level, at any point. He heard his wife and his mother arguing, and mother-in-law arguing, and he started laughing because he could see what was happening. He could see that what was happening was 2 people living their own little realities. These 2 worlds had come to war with one another. And he said he just started laughing, and his mother-in-law came through and said, "What are you laughing at?" And he's got up to stand up to explain, and he said he passed through the veil of this reality into the ultimate reality, which everything is made from, and then came back into his being. And I think his words were, "I'm home, I'm free, I've conquered this world." He realized what the world was. And then he started to share this conversation. It took him a while. He thought the world would change in 6 weeks because of what he'd seen. He thought the world would change in 6 weeks, bless him. We're still going at it. And this was 1974. 1973.
Good say.
No, I appreciate it. And he approached religious leaders, they couldn't hear him. He approached universities, they couldn't hear him. And bit by bit, he said people started turning up at his door, and he's got no idea how they heard about him or why. But people from all over the world, from India, from Tibet, all these people started turning up. Gurus started turning up and started to listen to what he had to say. He had people camping out on his lawn, and he started giving talks, and then psychologists started to hear, because people were getting better. People with physical illnesses were getting better, and people with psychological illnesses were getting better. And so psychologists started to get interested, and some of them were humble enough to listen to a welder. Some took a bit of convincing, and some never heard it at all. And I'm thankful to that man, because that man saved my life. Sue, the lady who introduced me to the principles, introduced me to Sid, it saved my life. So when we talk about these principles, really what we're talking about are words. The message isn't in the words. The message is in the words, but the fact isn't in the words, should I say. What we're talking about already exists within everybody on Earth and beyond, throughout all the planets in this galaxy, throughout all the planets in the universe. Wherever you are, if you are alive, there is a force running through you, and we call it, on this planet Earth in English, we give it the word consciousness in science. In religion, they call it spirit. You could call it energy. You could call it soul. You could call it self. And this self, this soul, this spirit, this energy has the ability to dream. That's its job. That's what it is. It's a dream. It dreams reality. It dreams reality that looks real. Unquestionably real. So real, it's real. It's our real. And whilst we don't understand this, we instantly assume that the external world is the reality that we're encountering, which within that confusion and within that misunderstanding, we've suffered wars because of, we've suffered greed because of, we've suffered famines because of, we've suffered segregation, we've suffered all kinds of terrible things, all because of a misunderstanding about the nature of reality. Because at that point, consciousness within most people wasn't capable of becoming aware of it at that point. If they were, they would have done. And certain people throughout time did. This isn't a new thing. This isn't something really that the Bible isn't speaking about, or the Torah, or the Quran. It's in there. It's written in there. But it's written in language from thousands of years ago, which today kind of sounds really nice, and it just becomes stories. And if you want to believe in it, you may. And if you don't, you may. But the fact doesn't matter. The fact doesn't care. And this fact is you, ourselves. I could call it the truth. God is truth. Truth isn't what we think, because that comes and goes and it changes. You can look at anything from anything. You can pick up anything. You can pick up a piece of cake and you go, oh, I'm really looking forward to this piece of cake. So looking forward to it. And you start into it and a few bites and you go, I've had enough of that now. It's for you. The experience changes. You could pick up, I don't know, a glass of wine. It's for you, Claire. Pick up a glass of wine. You could get halfway through it and then suddenly go, oh, I want more wine. Your experience from one glass, which perhaps you're like, nah, to the second glass, I think many people have experienced this. Second glass, oh, this is miles nicer. The experience of the same thing has changed. You only have to look at your partner to wake up next to them and, oh, I'm so fortunate to wake up next to you, and go to bed going, what the fuck am I doing with you? Why the fuck am I with you? What do you actually bring a benefit into my life? In fact, my life was so much better before we got together. Then we fall asleep and we wake up in the morning and we look at each other and we go, sorry about last night. You see, truth is not found in the experience. And this is why it's tricky to understand. This is why it's tricky to see. Hi, Xander. This is why it's tricky to see.
Hi, Joseph, and hi, Q.
Hi, Joseph.
Z.
Is that Queen Bees?
iPhone.
iPhone. QBZ. Queen Bees? I don't know. Hello.
How are we doing?
All right. Who is that, Joseph? Lovely to see you, mate. Or hear your voice.
Here we go.
Oh, there he is, big lad. Nice to see
You
you.
all right, mate?
Yeah, good, buddy, good. Thanks for joining us.
It's all right.
QB. QB, is it Queen Bee?
Do you want a bit?
You look like you're at work anyway. I like a person who skives off work. Well done. But this is why what we talk about at first can be quite difficult for people to kind of see. Because we're so entranced by the reality that we actually see. So entranced by what we see in the world and our prejudices that we carry around blindly, that we don't question if it's even real, if it's true, if it's a fact. So this is kind of the premise on which we want to speak about tonight. And if anybody, like Jen said right at the beginning, if anybody's got anything they want to talk about, speak up, shout up. What about this, Dave? What about that? About that, Jen? If there's anything that is on people's minds which they're struggling with, which they're curious, because we often get the question, what does the principles say about this, Dave? What do the principles think about that, Dave? We know you're watching telly, Paul. Yes, you are.
Plug me up the reason. Sorry about
That's all right, mate. That's all right. It's good. People often ask us, what do the principles say about this? What do the principles think about that? The principles don't think anything about any of those things. They create it. They create it. But those questions do come up. And this has gone out into coaching, and many people look at this from the point of view of, this can help me. This can do more than help somebody. I can promise people that. I can promise people that. But it can't fix anything about people. It can't fix you because you're not broken. There's nothing to fix. There's just pure misunderstanding. There's pure beliefs. So yeah, if anybody's got anything they'd like to talk about, please just shout up.
I was going to put Kate on the spot because I know she can't stay all night, and we've been meaning to do a reflection
Where is
for.
she? Oh yeah.
We've been meaning to do a reflection video because we've been doing videos with Kate, like over her journey. Like we've known Kate about 1.5 years almost, and you've been around it a few years, and it's been really cool to record you at different times, things that are kind of really alive for you. And we've been meaning to do that for like 2 months, and we've not managed to coordinate a time. So if you have got something to share, unmute yourself and share. If you just want to chill and listen, then don't unmute yourself and share.
Well, that would be rude. I'm just conscious that Pete might walk in naked in any moment, in which case I will unvideo myself.
Oh, don't do that.
Okay. He wouldn't care. Yes, I mean, I wanted just to come and see you guys anyway, because I haven't seen you for ages. And I'm just thinking what has been, it feels like loads has been going on since I last saw you. And where, I mean, I wouldn't know where it is. One thing I'm really seeing, so if I look at a funny thing happened with, where should I start? Okay, so what I'm seeing is that, you know, what you were saying at the beginning about the 3 principles isn't about judging and it's just what I've started to see is that I have just become an observer of life, and it's all fine. So I see, you know, before I used to think, well, if I'm thinking that, then I'm not getting this. You know, why am I getting caught up in that? And every time I did a video, Dave knows that I go off and start thinking about it and judging myself. And actually, a funny thing that happened that's just come to mind. a while ago, I looked at, so I put one of the videos online, and one of your videos that was online, and I happened to look at it. And as I looked at it, there was a thumbs down. And I was like, oh. And I went into my thing. I said, why are they just giving it a thumbs down? And I was in my ego, and I was thinking, and I started to feel that thought of why are they just giving it a thumbs down? And I just start looking, and I started to feel it. And then I started to notice, what's going on here? And I started to realize that I am, you start to see what beliefs that you have. And I started to see that I have this belief, or that this belief is starting to grow within me, which is I'm slightly identifying with sharing this understanding. It's like slightly becoming who I am. So then when you get a thumbs down, you take it personally, because it's becoming part of your identity. It's like, how, and then you see, like, this isn't who I am. I'll try and share this with anyone who wants to hear, but as soon as I have that belief, which is pointing in the wrong direction, I'm okay if people like what I'm saying. That's not true. I can never control that. I can never control what's going on outside of me. But it's only when we see belief, we look and we notice what's going on, that it makes sense. And I was like, oh, I don't have to identify with this. And it was such a relief, because I thought, I'm not responsible for people hearing or not hearing. I can do my best, and I can share how I share, but it's not who I am. It's not, it's not part of my being. And then the funny thing that happened was, I went on this journey and I saw it. I saw this belief that I had, and it was pointing the wrong way. Everything comes from within, and this was pointing the wrong way. And then I said to Georgia, I said, it's funny, I've just been on this journey. I've seen, that I was really starting to identify with this, and then I got this thumbs down. And she was there, because she saw me and she had the screen, and she went, yeah, you did that yourself. And I went, yeah, I know, I did it myself. And she went, no, you've done it yourself. It's blue. That means that the thumb is down. It means you've done it. And I was like, oh my God, the illusion. I have just done that. I've gone through that whole journey, and it was me who'd given myself a thumbs down anyway. So that just made me laugh, because I thought that was the whole illusion of life. And then I went, and also actually recently what's happening is Charlie, so Charlie is my 12-year-old. So George is my 15-year-old who got anxious, and that's when I went to see Dave and Jen, and everything changed. And so Charlie, he's 12, and he's now sort of starting to feel anxious as well, and I'm starting to see it's quite a natural age, I think, to there's a lot of change going on, age sort of 11, 12, and I can see that he has this belief, which is, I'm okay if I know where everyone is, like my family. I'm okay if I know where mum is. I'm okay if I know where dad is, or Freddie, or Georgia. And it's like, it's such, and then he gets really unstable, because he can't know where we are. Fred's now driving, George is going off, climbing all the time, off on the bus, and she never has a phone on. You never know where she is. Is she coming home? She's, having a fight with the bus driver, she's just off. And Charlie's left going, wow, I don't feel okay. And the amazing thing is that I'm not responding to him how I responded to Georgia. I'm not worrying about him. And the relief in that is so amazing as a parent, because he looks pretty wobbly. When he gets upset, he feels it. He feels it in his stomach. He can't eat. He feels sick. He keeps thinking that I'm going to have a car crash. Is his thing that he has. And I'm so sort of lighthearted about it with him. I just point at what he's doing, And, you know, the other day I went out and I came back and he'd got himself a bit worked up. And I went, hang on a minute, were you fine till like 1 o'clock? And he went, yeah. I said, and after 1 o'clock, you went into time because you were thinking she should be home by now. So she should, and you're in time and you're starting to, you know, whenever you go into time, it's like you start judging, it's a waste of time, or I'm late, or she should be here. And he looked at me and he went, oh, yeah, you know, as if, how do you know? How do you know, what I'm doing? And it's because we all do it. You know, it's all the same stuff. And he went to school. It was funny. He went to school last week and he had an exam. And he said, well, the phone rang in the exam and the teacher didn't pick it up. And I started to think that you'd been in the car crash. And I was like, I said, so what happened? You know, I'd never just say to someone, oh, it's just your thinking, because the power of thought is incredible, how you create and what you imagine, and then you feel it and you go off down that rabbit hole of, oh my God, she did pick up, and then. So he said, well, I got really worried because the teacher wasn't picking up the phone, you know, and I knew that you'd had a car crash at that point, you know, he'd really gone down with his imagination. And I said, so then what? I said, so she then picked up the phone and it wasn't you, but I'd got myself worked up and I had a little cry. And I said, and then what did you do? And he said, well, I sort of did what you said. And I said, well, what was that? And he said, I looked out the window and he said, I just got into the moment. And I was like, so you got in, so how did you do that? And he went, well, I just looked at the clouds and I looked at all the different shapes of the clouds and the thinking sort of went away. And again, you see, we could just laugh about it because I said to Charlie, I said, you know, another way of getting into the moment would be you're sitting in an exam. You could look at your exam paper. You know, that will also get you into the moment. You don't have to stare out the window at the clouds. But hey, that was fine too. But I'm just sort of thinking he's starting to see that he's doing this. He's not willing to let it go yet because the belief is still there. The belief is still there that I'm okay if, I'm okay if I know where mum is. But he's 12, and when he lets go of that belief, when he starts to see his own resilience, he's always okay. And he's got this energy running through him, this, and at the moment, all I can do is show him. And I can point to it and point to it and point to it. With George, I didn't used to do that. Remember, I pointed her away from it and I worried. And how can you, and school, they rang me up and they said, well, is Charlie okay? Because he's been crying in break. And I said, yeah, he's fine. He's fine. They went, well, he doesn't look fine. And I said to them, look, you teach them that they're resilient. You teach that's what we hear all the time, that you're teaching them that they're resilient. And yet, as soon as someone gets a bit upset, you really start worrying. I said, you don't need to worry about him. He really is okay. But, he just needs pointing back, that you need to just remind him that he's okay. And I think that we have this, this idea that, we have to, I'm talking about kids now, but we have to worry about our kids. And actually, no, it's when we connect with our kids, we know we don't need to worry because they've got the same, whatever we call it, love, running through them as we have. So they're going to be fine, whatever happens in life. And can I just tell you one more thing? Yeah. So then I was talking to Charlotte, my sister, and her husband, Brandon. And I realized that the power, again, of belief. And they've got this thing where they go, yeah, I get all that, but this, it's still coming from the stress is still coming from work, or the stress is still coming from, so it's like sort of saying, I get gravity, but all those pens are going to drop, but not this one. This one's different. And you're like, and I realized that if you're not when you don't see the entirety of this, like it is just principles behind life. If you're just going to use it as a tool and you sort of pick and choose, then it doesn't come alive. And I realized that you are actually, it's like my sister, I said, you've got your foot against the door. It's like it's all there, consciousness. It's but you, when you're saying that when you're seeing life happening to you, when you're not seeing everything coming from within, when you're not seeing your roles, then you're keeping it from, it's there, but you're pushing against it. And so we had these crazy conversations, and I won't talk all about it now because it's too long, but to cut a long story short, I said to Brandon, I said, it looks like you've got this, this belief that you're not good enough. You're not good enough for my sister, for Charles, for whatever reason, doesn't matter, And so therefore, whenever they had these conversations and stuff, everything would get filtered through that. And you start to see it and it all makes sense, because it was like he's wearing these like green shades, for example, and he's like, can't you see everything is green? And we're sitting there in these conversations and we're going, what is he talking about? It didn't make any sense. But for him, it made sense because he's seeing it through this belief. You see everything through your own belief. And then when he saw this, he would start to listen, and then he would connect from going to this, he'd been this crazy storm, as Dave, Dave knows, he's talked to Brandon. And then he would just quieten down and he'd connect to this other space, he'd connect back within to love. And then you'd see them together, and he'd be like, his body language would change, and he would see the person sitting next to him without the belief. And it was incredible to watch. And then we had this, and this would keep happening. And then we had this conversation, and I was talking, and I was just completely in the moment. And I think that when you are completely in the moment, others tend to just sort of follow your lead eventually when they sort of let go. And Brandon was sitting there and he said, oh my God, he said, this is like, it's like a mill pond. He said everything, and you've got to bear in mind, he'd come onto this call stressed out, completely stressed out, but he'd calmed down. And he said, like, nothing matters apart from this moment. It's like, he said, this is my true being. This is all that I am, me in this moment. And the other stuff I create and I make up, and I, moment to moment, I'm creating, and I'm resisting, I'm not accepting, and then for it's, and he saw it so deeply for that moment. And yet, you know what I'm going to say, Dave? His ego tells him that's not real. It is so, sharing this understanding, you just see the power of your ego, and the power of belief, the power of thought. And I'm there going, this is amazing. We've all, because they're in America, and so the three of us in that moment were so connected. Afterwards, I said, you're telling yourself that wasn't real, aren't you? And he, and that's what was happening. He was, that wasn't real, because he expected to look a certain way. You expect enlightenment to look a certain way, and when it doesn't look like what you think it's going to look like, your ego goes, that wasn't real. That was just a moment, and that wasn't real. And it's like, it's the most ordinary thing. It's like, it's so ordinary. All it is that just we create with our thinking, and we go into our thought, we create our reality. But we are, our true being, we're just here in the moment when we're not, we're not creating. What are you doing? I can see your head's going off to the side.
Sorry, Jay. I love Jace.
Ah, see, there's the J. And actually, you know, do you know what? Georgia did the same thing. You remember I told you about that funny thing that happened when I said, can I get some help here? Wake Georgia up. And then she had this crazy dream and she was, oh my God, I woke up. And the next day, when she woke up, again, she wasn't feeling, she was tired and she wasn't feeling how she thought she should be feeling. So she was like, oh, I made that up. And there's so many pointers to this. There's so much now that I just see in life that I don't explain away, that I just see life differently. Like nothing has changed and yet everything has changed. And everything is just deeper. And you there's never one way to look at something. You know, it's all, everything comes from within you, and you just start to notice and notice and notice, and you just observe life. And then the freedom in that is just, it's just amazing. And I think I'm talking for too long, so I'm going to stop.
Lovely. Thanks, love.
I love that I can always put you on the spot. Even when you say you've got nothing, you're like, well, I've got a little something.
Fiona
Well,
Bruce
do you know Naked Pete did arrive,
still exists.
Oh, we didn't see Naked Pete.
but he went out again. I tell you, Dave, just something really, really super quick. So Georgia now, she goes to the, so Georgia, this is my anxious child who's no longer anxious. She now, you know, she bikes into Bristol and she finds her way to the climbing club. And you know how she wouldn't say boo to a goose?
Yeah.
So she said, and last night she got back really late because she said, I just got so carried away because, you know, there was this man there. And, you know, we were discussing climbing routes and when, you know, we were both about the same level. And she said, you know, he wasn't really my age. You know, he was probably about 40 or something, but it's okay because he was from Yorkshire. Anyone up north is okay.
We're safe up north.
Well, you're safe up north. But anyway, I just,
Don't tell her about the Yorkshire Ripper.
oh, shush.
Yeah, he was a southerner. Love that.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Kate. Just in your beginning story about your dislike on YouTube, Leanne, I'm glad you put your screen on just then. Leanne and ourselves and Leanne's daughter, we did a conversation. And Jessie, Leanne's daughter, is just one of the most stunning human beings you could meet. Just absolute stunning little soul. Awesome human being. Beautiful. And she was talking about how she, with her eating disorder, that she kind of pulled herself out of. And we videoed this, put it out on YouTube. And within seconds, there was a dislike. And Jenny's like,
No, it wasn't within seconds. It was like a few days later.
oh, was it a few days later? We were
I was
like,
like, what? Who would have done that?
Who would
That
have-
was the most beautiful thing. And I was
how
like,
could you give that a thumbs down? Like, of all, fucking hell, there must be some really sad people in this world. Oh, it was us. We did it. We clicked on it. So we took it off and gave it a thumbs up. I like that though. And I love what you said about just the ordinariness of this.
and don't worry, I always get at least one thumbs down on every single video.
You get a thumbs down on everyone.
Every
There's
single
somebody
video.
who doesn't like
Even
it.
within seconds, it seems, which then surprised me. I'm like, you haven't even watched it and you hate it so much. It does seem quite
There's
personal.
somebody who doesn't like you, isn't there?
And the other day, you're like, you know, you've probably done it yourself. And then we checked, it's like, no, that makes it two
Yeah.
if we do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how ordinary you make this. It's like
So Rusty's trying to borrow.
Rusty's making a bed out of a plastic bag, if you can hear that.
Rust.
But this is just really normal. And I think this is a really important point. You know, it's really easy to create an idea of how life will look if you are okay. And quite often when you ask people this, they will say things like, I will be happy all the time. I will only experience joy and happiness and peace of mind and contentment. You finished?
He's trying to dig a hole in the
He's
pillow.
trying to dig his way through. And that's not the case. You know, we're actually all right. Even in the deepest grief, we're all right. We're not broken. We're whole. We're perfect. We're still here, still alive, experiencing. And then we can go from that deepest grief into a deep worry. We're still all right. We're still all right. The experience has changed and we're still all right. And then we can go from that deep worry into joy. And then we go, oh, now I've got it right. Now I've got it right. And it's like, no, the thing behind the experience, we're so kind of tied up into, it's almost like looking at this screen and seeing all these people. Now, I don't know about you and your computers or how you're seeing this, but on our computer, we've got it on gallery view, is it? So we got all these views, right? So I can see people dotted around. Leanne for me is in top right. Xander's just put his hand up in top left. And then I've got Paul just down to the Paul James down to the bottom right, and QB's on the right. And Xander's just moved because he's put his hand down. And it's like the screen's forever changing. You know, I see Kate turning her head and suddenly paying attention, and I see Paul's turned his TV off, and it's like I'm taking the piss. You see, it's like the screen's forever changing. And you know, we spend so long looking at this screen and looking at the images that come up upon it without any real respect for the constant nature of the screen itself and pixels. You know, the only reason why we get to have any of these images on our screen is because there is a screen with pixels, and these pixels don't go anywhere. Is Leanne going? Who's going?
Kate, I don't know.
This pixels and screen don't go anywhere. But the image is forever changing. Leanne's sitting, making herself comfortable. Paul's just walked off, and it's like the screen's forever changing. We get so caught up in what's happening on the screen. We have so little respect for the screen itself that actually shows us the image. You could say that the screen never goes anywhere. It doesn't care. The screen does not give a flying shit what it shows. It can show you the most gory, horrific horror scene, or it can show you the most amazing beauty and flower and sunset. It could show you two people in love. It could show you two people at war. The screen doesn't care, but it's always an image. It's always an impression, and it always looks real. Now, people have very little regard for the screen of themselves. The space from which this image that I see now in this present moment, I'm looking out of windows, I'm seeing trees, and I am aware of the computer in front of me, though I'm not looking directly at it. And now I'm looking at some lights that are hanging down and curtains and Jenny and Rusty, and now I'm looking back at you. It's like this image that I get to experience. The experience of reality that I get to encounter with its full dimensional experience and sound and taste and touch and feeling states and emotional states. And we never think about what is it? What is it? We've been so, from the moment we were born, we kind of were born into this amazing world. Came into this world. And then as we get older, we learn things. And as our parents tell us something, oh, support Man United. Your dad supports X football team. Most kids grow up supporting the same football team that their dads did or their uncle did. Why? Because we just take on other people's beliefs without questioning. And before we know it, that belief is so kind of behind the scenes and just playing out as beliefs do. Belief is what colors our reality. As Jesus Christ said, it is done unto you as you believe. It is done unto you as you believe. Your reality is whatever you believe in the moment. It will appear like that, and that will be your world. Whatever we believe in the moment will be our world. will be the world that we encounter, will be the world that we see. When we don't know that, we can create some horrific things. We can become terrified of so many things. We can become afraid of all kinds of things.
I was just going to say, I found an old interview earlier.
Oh, sorry, love, that's what I was
And,
trying to figure out what you're saying.
And it's from 2014, and a guy called Steve Light and another guy called Tony Fiedler used to do webinars, a couple of hour webinars quite regularly on social anxiety, because they'd both come from experiencing that. And as I was listening to my talk, I found it it came up on Facebook as a memory, so I clicked on it, and it was that when I came across the principles, who I thought I was crumbled. And I saw that what I'd been terrified of was my own mind. The character I'd created in my mind couldn't deal with life, couldn't deal with people, couldn't deal with reality that I thought happened to me. And like over the 3 days, it was like everything I thought I knew about myself had fallen away. And suddenly that space that Kate mentioned, Brandon had touched upon, like that space of just presence. Like I knew that was the realest thing I'd ever experienced. And I saw that I'd been terrorizing myself with my own mind and innocently believed thoughts that had come to mind, or, you know, adopting beliefs of a parent or a friend or a teacher or something you've seen on TV or something someone says to you. But it was weird because all of that stuff, which I'd spent years in therapy trying to sort out, suddenly got reordered, and that space within grew, like it grew in me. And like more and more I've been doing calls recently, and there's part of me that just wants to sit in silence with people, because it's like I've realized the words, and we try and grasp onto words, and like we try and find something in the principles, or we're listening for something that's going to help us, but it's this, like Kate was saying, the most ordinary present moment which we've all experienced throughout our lives, when we've just fallen present for whatever reason. Something's fallen off of our mind. And it was interesting hearing my interview, because I can see still, like, I talk about it very differently now. And actually, it seemed like the first big chunk of that interview, I was talking about what my life used to be like before. And I think in some ways I probably wanted to give people a context, but I can see even now, like, how I used to be is less and less relevant to anything I share now. And then sometimes I'm like, wow, I can't even believe I was like that. Because again, there's a movement with this, which is bringing you back to the moment, where you don't ruminate on the past in the same way. You don't hold on to who you think you are in the same way. And you recognize, like what I said on the interview, is I recognized that I thought anxiety was something that I had, or something that happened to me. And in some ways I'd objectified it as a real thing. And that realization that it was a thought, it was a creation, which then I viewed life through and myself through, changed everything. But I can also see, like Kate was saying, that when something's brought to life with us, the power that it comes with is it's our reality. It looks true and real. It's convincing. And the innocence in that, and
it will be our entire life in that moment.
Yeah, there's nothing outside of it in that moment, because that's what's being brought to life. And I think that's then when we then get into, oh, I shouldn't follow that thought. It's already happened. We're trying to change something that's past. And I think that's the beautiful thing. You're like, oh, I don't have to keep trying to change the past. It's impossible. It doesn't exist anymore.
I think that's a really beautiful point, just to kind of expand on that, so it doesn't really get missed. There's so much stuff talking about changing your thoughts. That's based in time. Time is based in thought. Time isn't a real thing. It doesn't actually exist. There is no future and there is no past. They don't exist. They only exist in imagination, thought, memory, thought. The future is not here now, doesn't exist. The now isn't, we tend to think of the now as being the place where the past goes into the future. That's how we tend to think of the now. We tend to think of the now as the point at which the past goes into the future, where the past becomes the future. We live in this continuous state of the past becoming the future. It doesn't work like that. If I was to draw it again, I would scribble that out and I would simply have a line. Scribble that one out and I just have the line. There is no past and there is no future. The past is a memory. We live in what you could call the ever-present now. It never goes anywhere. It's always the now. There is only ever the now. The now is the truest time. The rest of it's all made up. It's just an illusion of mind. It creates the illusion of time, creates the illusion of aging. You don't age, you just change. Change is the constant of the universe and creation. There is nothing in creation that isn't in a state of change. What we call aging is a fallacy, it's a myth. It's a convenient term to try and describe something. People don't get old. You don't get old. You can't get old in the ever-present now. Old's based in ages, which is based in time, which is based in years. It's all based in an illusion. We're all the same age. And when you take time out of the equation, trying to change thoughts suddenly becomes a completely ridiculous notion. How can you change something? If we live in the now, if it's true that the now is the only time and the only thing that's ever taking place, if it's true, then the moment a thought has come into being, it is immediately in the past. It's gone. It's moved through. And so therefore, the moment we try and change a thought, we're trying to change the past. We're trying to change the past. It's an illusion. We try and change thoughts because we're afraid of the experience we experience whilst we're experiencing them. Did I get that right? I think so. We try and change thoughts because we're afraid of how they feel. We don't like the experience of that thought. We don't want to think about this. So we set to trying to change it. But we do that because we're afraid of thought. Why are we afraid of thoughts? Is there actually, in truth and in reality, is there actually anything to be afraid of in a thought? Is there really a reason to be afraid of a thought? Logically, is there really anything to be afraid of in a thought? I've still got my ball of string from a client we had the other day. I nearly look soft. Don't laugh at me, Mackie lad. This is us. This is you. If I was to be more accurate, I would probably make a loop out of it, a ring. This piece of string, I'd make a ring out of it because it's an eternal thing with no beginning and no end. Bear in mind, I'm not talking about who we think we are right now. Dave, Joseph, Kendra, Kate, Lise. I'm not talking about that, Paul, or anything like that, Claire. I'm not talking about our names. I'm not talking about our characters. I'm talking about before the character that we experience, which comes and goes, that changes day by day. What are we? So if in reality I was to do this in a really clear, like honest, true reality way, I would make it into a loop, because a ring has no beginning and no end. That's why they're used in wedding vows and stuff like that. And eternity, eternal. Ring goes on forever. You never get to the end of the ring. You never get to the end of you. You are eternal. You were there when you were born, and you will be there when you die. You were there before you were born, and you will be there after you die. You. An essence. The spark of life. The difference between a live body and a dead body. Anybody who's seen a dead body knows that the person is not there. The energy that enhoused, that enlivened that physiology no longer exists. It's moved, it's departed. The body remains, but the essence, the person who you would call, the name you would give them, has departed. Their character, their feeling state, their imagination has departed the physiology. It's gone. There's a difference between a live body and a dead body. I'm talking about that energy that enlivens, and it is an eternal thing. But for ease of this argument, I'm going to straighten it out. I'm going to say, this is us. This piece of string is us. Us is a mind. Us is consciousness. The force of life itself. Us is the ability to think. That's why, who the hell was it in the Bible who asked, what is the truest name for God? Asked God, what is the truest name? Really, he asked himself, what's the truest name for God? And he said, I am. He came back with, I am. This is I am. I am is who we are before we then attach onto it. I am happy, I am sad, I am Dave, I am a male, I am British, I am this, I am that. I'm good enough, I'm not good enough. I am is the ever-present state of people. And that's why in the Bible it says God is I am. So whatever you want to call this, it does not matter. This piece of string is you. It's me. It's all of us. Okay, it's our mind. And what our mind does is it thinks. And as it thinks, but back in the day, I would describe my mind, and I quite like Mind. It's in the logo for Mind, the charity. It looks like a scribble or a tangled piece of string. Back in the day, most of my time was spent in a tangle in my mind. I had very little awareness. But if this piece of string is us, this piece of string is whole, it is not broken. Moses, thanks, Sander. Thanks, dude. This piece of string is unbroken. It cannot be broken. This is spirit. Another word for consciousness, Holy Spirit. Bearing in mind, that was 2,000 years ago language. Whole spirit. What this mind has the ability to do, it has the ability to think what you could call good thoughts and what you could call bad thoughts. Good thoughts and bad thoughts. Good experiences and bad experiences. It's all born of the same thing. We can have happy thoughts and we can have sad thoughts. We can have anxious thoughts. We can have thoughts of whatever we want. What kind of yogurt do I want to eat today? Suicide thought. It's all string. No matter what thought we have, it is string. No matter what shape, how big the thought, or how little the thought, it's all string. It's all coming from the same place. It doesn't matter what knot I tie in this, whether I tie a monkey's fist, whether I tie a bowline, whether I tie a slip knot, whether I tie a timber hitch, whether I tie a noose. It's all tied from string. This string can take on many different appearances, an infinite amount of appearances. I could throw this string down and I could never throw it 1,000 times and it will never take exactly the same form, exactly the same shape. And I should never expect it to. It would be illogical for it to be able to do so. And what we tend to do is we get so tight, so kind of mesmerized by the knots that our mind has created, the thoughts, the experiences, the feelings, that we get so engrossed in them. We try to figure out, how do I untangle myself then, Dave? How do I untangle myself? How do I get out of this tangle that I'm in? We're so busy looking at the tangle without any awareness of what the tangle is made of. The tangle is a thought. The tangle we are experiencing is a thought. It doesn't matter if the thought we've had since we were 10 years old and now I'm in my mid-60s. It doesn't matter if I only just developed this thought, this belief 20 minutes ago. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the thought was happy or whether it was sad, whether it was something that we felt brought a benefit into our life or whether we felt it brought suffering into our life. It doesn't matter what experience we are experiencing, it is always going to be exactly the same thing. It's all one. It's all one. We kind of think that experience comes from good things and bad things happening in the world. That's why I feel like I do, because this good thing happened in the world, so therefore I feel good, and this bad thing happened in the world, and that's why I feel bad. If that was true, if the world could give experiences, there wouldn't be a single argument on the planet, because we'd all see the same thing. And like I keep saying, there wouldn't even be a need for language. There'd be nothing to talk about. There'd be no need for my reality to communicate with your reality or your reality to communicate with mine. There'd be no need for language. We wouldn't speak. We'd never have felt the need to develop it. The only reason why we felt the need to develop language was because each of us lives in our own reality. If that wasn't true, if there was a true reality as it looks like externally, we'd all see the same thing. We'd all see it. We'd all behave in the same, because it'd be reality, it'd be the truth. So therefore, when it happened, we'd all behave the same, we'd all feel the same. There'd be nothing to discuss because we'd all know what each other are thinking because it'd be reality. We'd be drones, but we're not. We're all free thinking individuals and we can think anything we wish. We are so free to think, we can think positive thought or negative thought. We are so free, but we think we're trapped because we believe that we're trapped, because we don't understand what is life. Life is a magical experience. Life is a mystical, magical experience. Explain life. What is life? Explain it. Try and figure that one out. What is this life? What is all life? Where does it all come from? And you'll realize it has to come from something intelligent because, well, look at us. We're amazing. We are absolutely amazing. And you realize, oh, but I am that life, so therefore I must be amazing. I must be something far more amazing than I've ever realized, which kind of makes me special. and magical and mystical. You'd be right, yeah. That's exactly what it makes us. Everybody on earth is the most magical, mystical, creative source. But it's all one creative source, appearing as many different creative sources. Everybody's a piece of string. Everybody is, every single moment, making loops in the string that look like this, that look like that. Sometimes it looks like we have a bit of a tangle time, then we chill out a bit before we then go on to make the next tangle. And
But it's like you said earlier, even the tangle is really only in the moment, the
That's
thought
right.
of tangle. Like it's only ever singular. Like it's not this. Like we live as if there's like loads of thoughts trying to get us at once, but it's actually momentary. And you're saying like that in itself is a thought. The idea of a tangle is a thought.
that's correct, yeah.
The idea of clear mind is thought. Like it's all thought. And I think I used to think thoughts that were like backed up here were somehow going to get me up here, like in my life. And it's like they were going to suddenly come back.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that once something is gone, it can't come back.
But I keep thinking the same thing though.
But it's like you have to see that in the moment, thought is fresh. Regardless if it has the same flavour as a thought you had yesterday or the day before, it's still new in the moment.
It's a
You
fresh
can never
creation.
have an old thought. It's always consciousness in the moment. It's always new. It's always fresh. And I think when I started seeing it like that, you realise how nothing can get you from the past. Things can come to mind, but it's in this moment. And that's the beautiful thing. Like our perception or our image or our memory of a past event can change. With new understanding, things look different. So I know that for me, I look back and my life looks very different through understanding eyes than when I used to look through judgment and blame and victimhood. So you see, even that is another loop. It's another, the thought look, the past looked like that, but then suddenly the past looked like that. And that can change on a day-to-day basis. So you see that all of it is so changeable.
It's all made up.
But the constant that we can rely upon is that the string will continue to create loops. Our mind will continue to create reality, experience. That doesn't change. What the experience is changes, and it can change so quickly. I've been having the best day before, and then one thought will drop in, and I'm like down on the floor, and I've got the feeling in my stomach, and then sometimes I have a bit of a hangover from that, and it kind of, that feeling seems to linger for a little bit, even though I'm kind of aware what I'm doing. And but you just kind of, that's just life. Like I remember a friend came to our retreat once, and he was listening to the questions, and I eventually said, it's almost like everyone's asking for death, because all the questions about how do I do this about my ego? How do I see past my ego? And how do I get rid of this experience? And he said, we're asking for our ego to die and then expecting to have an experience. But the ego is another way to describe the creation of a duality. And actually we need that to experience and have relationships. Like it's a really helpful thing to have a name and a character and
see self and other.
And I don't know, I think we so often think it's something to go to war with, rather than more of it can be a really interesting, reflective thing when you start to see the nature of how changeable we are. Like I used to identify with anxiety, eating disorders, depression, not good enough, blah, 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 blah. Like that's who I was. And then I saw on that 3 days that stuff kind of, it was like it got completely taken out of my mind. And I had months really where I felt this spaciousness and I couldn't take things personally. And I kind of looked at other people and I'd be like, wow, how could you take that personally? Do you not realize? But then the beautiful thing is, wow, I came down to my knees again and earth kind of with a bang.
Humbled you.
It humbled the hell out of me because I'm like, totally got caught up in thought again. And I'm like, yeah, that's how it happens because it looks bloody real. Like it looks so real in the moment. But the difference was the understanding and the place that I'd found within myself even when I did seem to get lost, it comes with you. It might seem quieter, but there's an awareness in my mind. I would say it's been constant since I came across this. Like, is this real? Is what's going to, like, it's questionable. I'm suspicious of my own mind. Whereas before I used to buy into it full. Whereas now I'm very suspicious of what I think. Because of that, could wake up in the morning and think you're brilliant, could go to bed that night, think you're a dick. Like, momentary. And you see,
I thought you were going to say most nights.
momentary. But you see how that's the thing that changes. And that's the thing we've been identifying with. And no wonder we kind of struggle, because we're like trying to identify with something that's constantly moving and changing. And I think the principles for me was like, I remembered the space that doesn't change. I remembered the space that observes change. I think Kate used that word earlier. There's a place within us that isn't born and doesn't die. It's just always been. And I think that's also the space we seem to then be able to connect with others on. When there has been times when I have sat with someone and we have just fallen into silence, and it seems to be more was said in that silence than the whole rest of the call. Because there's something known in that silence that resonates with someone else. And I think the other thing I loved about learning about the principles was that it was said, don't take my word for it. Like Dr. Roger Mills, who was my first teacher, said, don't take my word for this. See if this is true for yourself. I'm pointing you to something that I know to be true. But I want you to go away and like experiment with it. Is this true? Does reality change? Hang on a minute. How comes I react like that to that situation and that person reacts like that? We start to see the evidence and the truth for something. And then that's an insightful learning. It's not adopting someone's belief. And that's why it moves us and changes us so much, because we're learning from our own internal source, our own guide. And the truth doesn't change. Like the way that I articulate what I've started to see in life has changed over the last 16 years since I came across the principles. But the truth that I'm trying to point to hasn't changed. And I think when I look back at some of the, like the video that I found earlier, I thought, God, I talk about it different there. But I know that what I was speaking about then was completely alive in me. It made so much sense, and I was in the feeling of it. And I think that's what used to come across, because when I was listening to it, I was like, oh, I don't think I'd say that anymore. Oh, I don't know if I'll probably edit that out now. But I know that at the time, it's the aliveness of the understanding rather than the content and the words. And like Kel said earlier, like about all the different courses and, you know, people who train to be facilitators. And it's one of the things we have so many conversations of. This is, you can't certify it. You can't tick a box and say, right now, I've got this. I've learned the principles now.
No.
Because the principles in a way is a metaphor for life and what's before. What comes before the creation of life. And I don't think you can't ever really get to the end of that. So you can't tick the box and go, right, I know this, I'm qualified now, I'm going to teach. Like we said to Kel, like, see stuff for yourself and then share it. Don't try and sound profound, and unless that's what's coming to you in the moment. Be yourself, wake up to who you are and go out and share with people who you are. Like, it might not be in teaching, it's in your presence that does the teaching. The amount of people in the early days of me coming across this who had quite big shifts and changes and wake ups, and I couldn't talk about the principles. I didn't even remember exactly what they were. I didn't have the definitions for them, but I showed up in a very different energy or vibration or space, and other people started to like resonate with that and started to change. And I couldn't put my finger on it and I couldn't put it into words. And then when I got quite heady with the principles and wanted to teach it and teach it right, that impact got less, because I was suddenly sharing concepts and ideas and other people's insights. But this isn't that kind of understanding or learning. Like I know when I first came across the three principles as a paradigm, it did something for me. It really changed me and took a lot off my mind. And I was so like excited by it. And then I made like a concept out of it, and I'm like, oh, did I teach it right? No, I shouldn't say that. Oh, that's not paradigmatic. And I got so in my head that, again, the impact changes. People felt that I was heady when I was with them rather than just present. And that's the thing that I think, the thing that changes people, we can't put words on. The thing that wakes up in someone doesn't have language or words or time,
And
which is how change can happen in a moment. I believed I was in a system that told me I would struggle for my whole life with eating disorders on and off, and depression probably. I was 14, I think, when someone told me that, 14, 15. And to see the untruth of that in a moment set me completely free of that identity. And that's the thing, like it was in a moment. And mum and dad totally freaked out because change takes time. You have to work on yourself. All of those things are good ideas. They're made up because what you're working on is a thought creation that's already gone. Who you think you are does not exist in the world of time. It exists in a memory, in a thought. It only exists in the moment you're thinking it. It doesn't exist in the past or in the future. So that you're going to work on something that has no form now. It's already in the past. Like the beginning of this call's in the past. Now's in the past, because I've already said it. Like, so you see how that moving, changeable life stuff isn't where the answers are going to come from. They come from a space within you that we already have, we already know, we already are. And I think that's the thing that I knew when Roger spoke to me in a group of like 30 odd people. It was like everything he said, it was like it was saying it perfectly for me. It's like, that's true about me. And then I realized everyone else in the room was kind of, it's true about everyone. It's true about everything. And that's something you brought to me was, this isn't just a human thing. This is a nature thing. We are nature. Trees, plants, animals, birds, like all of it, insects. And as soon as we start seeing this in ourselves, we start seeing it in everything.
you see that nature doesn't make imperfection.
At all.
There is not one single imperfect tree.
And I've been just seeing in the garden this week the amount of insects and beetles and patterns and colours and creatures and life that's so perfect. But we can then create the idea of imperfect.
I'm not right. I should look more like this. I should look more like that. I should feel more like this. I should feel more like that. You see, but human beings are nature. Nature doesn't make mistakes. Nature doesn't make imperfect things. It creates beings with some beings, such as human beings, which have the ability to dream anything. Now, when I talk about this for human beings, I've just seen a pigeon fly past. That pigeon lives in its own reality. It lives in its own experience. And no two pigeons, you walk down the street, I don't know, I've got lads here from Sunderland and Dublin, and Kendra's in Kendal and Southend and whatnot. We come across pigeons in the street. Now, some pigeons will land on your shoulder and they'll take food out of your hand, and some pigeons will shy away from you. Some pigeons will walk around you by your feet, and some pigeons won't even come in anywhere near town. Because each one has its own set of beliefs. Each one is experiencing its own reality. What I'm talking about separate realities in this regard is every single living organism, no matter what form it has taken, is an experience. That's its purpose, to experience a life, a physical existence for a period of what appears to be time. Everything comes and goes. I can hear a blackbird singing now, little blackbird singing. It's got something to say to the other blackbirds and the other birds around our area. It's got a message to say. So it's speaking, it's speaking, it's speaking. We think birds are singing, they're not singing, they're communicating a message just like we are tonight. It has a message, it has a reality, it is an experience of life. Every single fly on our window is its own separate reality, is its own individual experience of life. It sees the reality. Each fly sees a different reality. Each ant in a colony, could be thousands of ants in a colony. Each ant is its own little reality, sees its own world from its perspective of life. When you start to look at this, you start to get a sense of reality. It is an infinite event taking place now. It's actually uncomprehendable. It's infinity, it's life, it's death, it's now. It's all now. It's all taking place in the now, this infinite reality. How many organisms is there on a planet? Infinite amount, because there's some are going into existence, some are going out in a continuous experience, eruption of experience in the now, an infinite eruption of experience in the now. We are simply an aspect of that. There is no such thing as a wrong experience. There is no such thing as a wrong experience. There is no such thing as a wrong thought or a wrong feeling. It doesn't matter what form this piece of string takes. There's no such thing as a wrong loop. You know, it doesn't matter what shape the loop takes. It only appears to matter when we say that's a wrong thought. When we think that that thought was wrong. When we think that that think was wrong. When we start to get into the idea that when I think that that think was wrong, we start to beat the shit out of ourselves. And when we start to think that that feeling which comes along with that thought, each feeling that we have only exists because, first of all, we dreamt it. If you are asleep in your bed and you are fast asleep and you are dreaming, you undergo all the emotions of the daytime awake state. In the dreams, you experience joy, you experience happiness. I had this amazing dream last night. I was doing this. I had this terrifying dream last night. I woke up, my heart was pounding. I was full of adrenaline. Your body does not know the difference between a wake state and a sleep state. The body does not know the difference between a wake state and sleep state. If you dream you are being chased by a lion, you will fully experience it. Your heart will pound, your adrenaline, cortisol will be released, you will sweat. That adrenaline will then wake you up, and you'll wake up and you'll be like, bloody hell. Oh, your body did not know the difference. If you were being chased by a lion in a wake state, it would do just the same thing. It's a pointer. It's a pointer. It's something to notice. Well, if that's true, it's a pointer to the fact that the entirety of reality is ultimately what you could call a dream. It's a manifestation of thought. Whether it's in the awake state or whether it's in the sleep state, it's all the same thing. We dream that we are anxiety. We dream we are a depressive. We dream that we are an addict. We dream this, we dream that. We just dream. That's our being state. Cal's going to the dream state sleep.
But the birds are really singing. It was quite, I'm sort of listening to you and listening to the birds, and it's like just sort of sending me into a bit of a trance.
The same here.
Just zoning out, listening to you.
So nice. And it's so nice just to look at this amazing world and listen to it. Listen to this amazing event that we call this world. This inexplicable. Everything we're talking about is inexplicable. I do not have a fucking clue about any of it. I don't. Haven't got a clue. Have not got a fucking clue. I cannot tell you what thought is. I cannot tell you what thought is. What is thought? I could give you a concept, and that would be like taking an infinite field and condensing it down to a potential, an infinite potential, and condensing it down to a potential. That potential is not infinite, it's a collapse. It's a collapsing of the infinite into a potential. To see the truth, you must realize the infinity of it all. And infinity is not something you can ever get your head around. It goes on and on and on. You cannot get to the end of thought. You cannot run out of thought. It's not something that's finite. You can't get your head around it. That's what you are made of. Consciousness. You cannot get your head around consciousness. You can start to see its characteristics and how it plays out. But even if you were to fall into the space, which is not uncommon, I experienced it myself, it's not uncommon, where you see beyond the veil of this reality, you go within your own being, because that's all there ever is. There is only ever within your being that you ever experience. You can't experience something outside of yourself. It appears like we do. It appears like we experience traffic and weather and recessions and COVID and all this bullshit. We feel like we experience that, but the only thing we're ever experiencing is ourself from within, our dream coming through about that subject. If you are not aware of the subject, it is not in your reality. You don't encounter it. If there's somebody stood behind you and you do not know they are there, it is not in your dream. It is not in your reality. You do not experience it as a reality, and you never have and you never will. But what this is coming from, even if you get to see it, which everybody will at some point everybody will wake up to this point. Everybody has to wake up to this. Everybody's going to wake up to this at some point. If they go beyond the veil of this reality, they take an inward look rather than an external look, and I don't mean with the eyes. They will find a space of utter perfection, the most beautiful place they've ever been in their life. Pure love, wholeness, contentment, unbreakable source, and you will not want to leave it. Because it's so amazing. And when people come out of that, and when I came out of that space, I didn't want to come back into this reality. But then it didn't take me long to realize, oh no, that reality was within me. I am that reality. That's where all this comes from. God is this love that exists within all people. It exists within everybody. There is nobody. You cannot exist. You could not exist if this was not the case. Because there's nothing but it. You couldn't exist. There is nobody on earth who isn't this perfection. But when you come out of that space and anybody asks you about it, you will just go, I can't talk about that. I don't know what that is. Because we're in this human experience. And we're trying to make sense of something with the intellect that takes infinite potential and collapses it down to a potential that only sees loops, doesn't see the string, it only sees the loop, it only sees the knot. We try to make sense of it. That's why trying to figure all this shit out is of no value. If you listen to this subject, just listen to it and don't try and figure it out. You don't have to listen. You don't have to figure this one out. You can't. But you can wake up to it. And when that movement starts to take place, you feel it because you feel lighter. The truest state of being in that space is the most light you can imagine. It's so light, you can't imagine light like it. And you know you're heading in that direction because your emotions start to feel lighter. You head towards the experience of love and away from the experience of fear. The polarities, the dualities of experience, love and fear. Love, fear. They're all born of the same thing. Everything is born of love. Fear is an illusion. We're only afraid of something because we see it as a threat to ourselves. In truth, there is no threat to the self. Everything is the self. We are the trees. We are the flowers. We're the planets that we're not even aware of. Because what makes the planets makes us. We are that essence. Whatever makes the universe made us. It can't be any other way. It's impossible. Everybody is all things. There is nothing to be afraid of in truth in this lifetime. There is nothing to be afraid of. We become afraid of our experiences. And we favour some experiences over others. That's natural. It's fine. It's cool. But it's all the same thing. Yeah. All comes from the same source. No matter what we think, it's all the same thing. What creates the suicide thought creates the thought, what flavour yogurt do I want? What creates anxiety creates joy to mind. That can never be broken.
I remember one of the beautiful things you said on one of our retreats was that you can see that the movement towards love and all of the kind of characteristics of that is towards unity and oneness and of duality and self and other, and all the things that come around fear of jealousy, hatred, anger, greed are all born of the idea of duality. And it seems that the more we move in the direction of love, it seems it's the truest sense, because it doesn't need other, it just is. You know, in the Bible it says God is love.
One God.
And
God is love.
And I think that's
one source.
Why you can kind of see when I've worked with people and see them kind of waking up to this, they seem to have more feelings of connection and love and joy, and it isn't attributed to something. It's just like filled with that feeling, and that is unity. That's a unifying thing. It's a oneness thing. Whereas all the things that we don't like and we don't like experiencing are born of fear, and that's only in a dualistic world can we experience that. So the feeling that we're in is a beautiful guide to whether we're kind of really lost in the dualistic side of life and the illusion of that, or whether we're kind of getting more in touch with the true reality, which is only wholeness, which is only one, which is only love,
which is only perfect.
And so we have that guide in life. Like the feeling is the guide. It doesn't mean we have to do anything with it, but that awareness is enough. And I think that's something that I realized after coming across this, the depth of love that I could feel changed, because it felt like it was a love for no thing or no one. And I hadn't really experienced so much of that in my life. It was
and
very
at the same
conditional.
time, everything and everyone.
Yeah. But I'd love to see, we've got 15 minutes. If people had questions or comments or anything that they'd like to share, it'd be really nice to hear from people.
Can I just say, I love the fact that Claire's got a wind machine on, blowing her hair. Like,
I'd love
Cheryl
to do
Cole.
this again.
Eh?
What?
Cheryl Coleman.
Oh, Cheryl Cole. You know, that lovely in the different feeling. It's where what I'm seeing is that when I spend lots of time on my own, and when I spend lots of time at the beach, and when I just sort of look out my window and watch the birds, like, and the squirrels playing in the trees, that every that oneness, that just lovely feeling, everything's there. And then where I think I might struggle, if struggle is the word, or where I get pulled out of that feeling, is when is when I have to talk to other people and get into their worlds and get into their realities. And
I think that can be a bit tricky for me, because I feel like I either cut off and look kind of a little bit emotionless, and not have not so much empathy, because I just think it's thought, and that it's just, you know, it's not real, and or I get drawn in and get pissed off, and get into it with people. And so I tend to withdraw. I tend to just have time on my own to get back to that feeling, which I know is always there. And I'd love to be able to be and live in life practically every day, being able to still be physically around people, yet still staying in that space.
It's interesting we see all that as a problem. The problem is when I have to be around people, I fall out of that space. Why is that a problem, really? Is it really a problem? Or is it only a problem because we believe it's a problem? We think it's a problem. We're back to the idea that things outside of ourselves do have the power. So people do actually have the power to bring me out of that space. I was speaking to a man the other day. He was walking down to the shop and he passed a fella on the street, a black fella on the street. He said he's been on the street for years. He said, no, everybody just walks past him. He said, and he said, on this day, he said, I saw him. And he said, I went and bought him some food. And I went and sat down next to him and I asked him his name and he said, he's got the same name as me. He said, we had a laugh about that. He said, and in that moment, we were both filled with the most love. He said it was beautiful. He said, we just sat there and we just connected and people were walking past and we didn't notice them. He said, we were just so in the moment and so in love, so connected. He was completely and utterly in that experience that you're talking about, yet he was around people. We think there is a limit to love. We think love has a limit. Love is only limited to one person. Love is only limited to a family. Love is only limited to our friends and our close friends and family. No, love is boundless. Because really that's what we're experiencing. We're experiencing the experience of love, which is boundless and doesn't actually have a prejudice and doesn't care whether you are around people or not. That's the truth of the matter.
Well, one of the things I was going to say though is, like, I always remember hearing Ram Dass say, if you think you're enlightened, go and spend a week with your family.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is, you see how it's our mind when we're around family members, our judgment, our ideas of the relationship. It's our mind that seems to take us away from that space. When we're on our own, we don't think about other people in the same way, but it's taking that responsibility, and that's the good news, because it can change. Like, I know that I used to just feel really uncomfortable walking past people who are homeless. Like, I wouldn't quite know what to do, and if I didn't have anything to give, then I'd feel ashamed, so then I wouldn't even look at them. And now my experience is very different since being with Dave, because he talks to everyone. He goes down, crouches down and has a chat, and sometimes we might buy them some food, sometimes we might just have a chat with them. So my experience of being around people who live on the street is very different now. And when I came across the principles, I remember saying, oh, I love it, but one of the things I used to say was that I get so de-energized by big groups of people. I feel so de-energized afterwards. It's like they take my energy, and I really believed that. And it was maybe a few years into learning about the principles, I kind of had this insight. It's like, what does your mind do when you're in big groups of people? You start thinking about what you look like. You start thinking about how you come across. You start thinking about what they think of you. I could see how my mind would ramp up, and that's why I was de-energized. And still sometimes it happens, like in big groups of people, I'm probably can get quite exhausted afterwards. But then there've been other times I feel so uplifted and energized. And the thing to know is like it's always going to be our mind, which is the good news, because that can always change. But at the same time, it's like, well, am I always supposed to live in that space? If we have that as this is the only space I want to live in, then we're going to create that judgment when we're not in it. Oh, I shouldn't be feeling like this. Oh, I felt so good earlier when I was just sat on the beach and looking at the sunset, and now I'm drawn into all of this. But I think something that quite naturally happens with this understanding is that life and people become less and less personal. So I can be with some of the same people that I used to find incredibly draining and not feel drained from them, because I don't take the interaction personally. And I think that's the only thing that will be going on, is something within your mind. But it's not a judgment thing.
No.
Like it's so innocent and we don't even see it. It's so quick, it's so sneaky. But to know that it does exist is almost like the first thing. Like you're aware that this space exists. It isn't only when you're on your own that it's available to you.
And the thing is, if you believe that, the moment you see somebody coming, you will instantly go, oh, for fuck's sake. Oh, now I'm going to lose that lovely feeling. Because there's people about.
What fresh hell is this?
Say that again, dude.
What fresh hell is this?
One more
What fresh.
All right, yeah. That sounded really broad. I liked it. Yeah, man. It's interesting. It's like, it's simple things like we don't question. I went to a talk with Keith and Valda, and Valda said, I used to believe that because I hadn't had a good night's sleep, I was going to have a shit day the next day. Fuck me, guilty. Guilty as charged. And then she said, and then one day I realized just because I haven't had a bad night's sleep, because I had a bad night's sleep, does not mean I have to be in a grumpy mood the next day. And I was like, oh, I'd never even considered that. I have not had a bad mood, grumpy day the next day after having no sleep since. Doesn't mean I don't have my ups and downs and feelings, and I feel every single emotion. In fact, I think I feel them more now. I actually think I feel deeper, both high and low. When I feel more emotion because I'm not afraid to feel it. I'm not afraid to cry as a bloke. I'm not afraid to feel love. I'm not afraid to tell people I love them. I'm not afraid to feel that love. I'm just free to be me. And I think that this is ultimately what this allows people to find, an authentic, if you want to call that, an authentic illusion. An authentic self, one which isn't fighting, what I'm talking about now is one that isn't fighting what is, isn't fighting the experience. One that knows it's all right to feel. It's all right to feel anxious. It's all right to feel anxiety. It's all right to feel depression. It's all right to feel worry. What are those feelings without the associated made up label that we give them? What is the feeling of anxiety if it doesn't have attached to it the story of anxiety and what we think it means? What is that feeling? It's a feeling.
And I remember someone saying, if you wrote down the characteristics of anxiety and then you wrote down the characteristics of like the feeling in your body of falling in love or of excitement, they're incredibly similar. But one will say is a good thing and where it's excitement, and the other one will say, oh no, that's anxiety, that's bad, that's wrong. But the actual sensation is very, very similar.
It's all the same thing.
And I think also you just realize we can learn. Like I've said to you, when I feel my reaction come up in an interaction, it's almost like I see there's something I'm not seeing here, or there's something I could learn. Like I think we become learners to life. Like it's all right as a concept. I'm aware that that space does exist regardless of what's going on around. Well, it's a concept until we've experienced it. So you see that there's something coming up in you that you could learn from. And I think when we become open to learning, we start getting insight about our own ego, our own belief, the stuff that's a bit invisible to us. And then it's not such a bad thing, because, and that's something I've again learned from you, is you've got reactive sometimes with people, you've fallen out with people, and then you've got quite reflective and seen something about your own ego, and you've been able to apologize, and you've learned. And it's like, it's all this learning. But if we're like, oh, when I understand, that I won't do that when I'm around people, like there isn't any learning in it. It's just like this achievement of this idea of who we think we're going to be. But I feel like when I act out, I see it as an opportunity to learn, rather than I'm doing life wrong, or
Yeah.
this situation is wrong, or I need it to be different. Like, it's just, wow, there's something to see here. And you get really curious of your own mind, like, what's going on?
There's only a problem if we believe there's a problem. Problems don't exist in the world. There is no problem in the world. A problem is a perspective. A problem is a thought, not a thing. Xander.
Hello. Sorry for butting in with that. What fresh hell is this? It just like sprung to mind and I had to say it, you know. I'm aware of the time, but right, okay. I'm thinking about what you're saying. I'm not actually thinking about what you're saying. I'm just, you know, what's occurring to me is that you're saying it's okay to feel these, what we term as negative emotions, anxiety, sadness, whatever do you want to, whatever they are, it's okay. And yet it is okay. It's natural to feel them. The problems begin when we begin to live in them or get stuck in them. And the reason we get stuck in them, I think, maybe that's right, but what I understand is that the reason we get stuck in them is because we try to resist them. And the reason we try to resist them is because we're trying to resist what they are a reaction to. So something simple, if I miss the bus and it makes me angry, I don't know, I've lost that. That's natural, but it may or may not be natural to feel angry if I miss the bus. It's I have a bus stop right outside my front door, you know, and quite often I found myself giving myself a wee smile because the bus has passed as I was locking my front door. Right, I don't drive, so but I used to have a reaction to that every single time. Every time, you know, they're doing it to me deliberately, you know, it's all about me, you know. But there was once a guy I listened to, and he talked about how every year there was a woman that he knew, and her daughter passed away 10, 12, 15 years. Time went on and on and on. And every single year, time and time again, now grief is a kind of, you know, my wife passed away 3 years ago, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a difficult thing to talk about sometimes. But when you get stuck, it's okay. This woman would buy herself something and say, look what my daughter got me for my birthday. Every single year for 10, 15, 20 years. Now that's stuck. I'm sorry, but you know, that's stuck, right? And if I get stuck in my depression, it's not my depression, it was, I wasn't even depressed. This was depressed, right? This had a constant feeling of depression, right? And it lasted for a long time. And talking in real terms, or maybe not, but talking in normal language, I was stuck in that. I was stuck in a belief that I was depressed. And not only was I depressed, but I was deeply depressed. I was more depressed than anybody had ever been, right? You know, my pine box was going to be really, really special because I was for diving into it, you know. I just wanted to end everything. And I was stuck in that for a long time. And then one day I realised there's only one person can get me out of this. And that's me. So then we talk about, you mentioned changing your thoughts. It's not that you can't change a thought that's passed. You can't resist a moment. We can't change the reality that is gone. Like if the bus is gone, it's gone. It just is. There's nothing you can do about it. But we resist that. We resist like if I was to get stuck in and resist the fact that my wife is gone, what kind of mess would I be in? You know, where would my mind be? What kind of state would I be in day to day? I would be stuck, and it would be all because I was resisting reality. The fact is, and it is, and there's nothing I can do about it. And it's when the ego wants to resist what is, because the ego wants what the ego wants, and whatever that is. And yeah, so those were just some of the things that come up as you were talking. So, and me being me, I had to get my edge in, you know, I had to get my toppings in. You know.
Oh man, that's beautiful. You're right, the ego's never satisfied. The ego, you make £1 million right next to £2 million. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I've lost £1. Oh, I lost £2. It's not good enough. £2 now. It's like the mind is never satisfied because the mind thinks, which then creates an impression of there's something else. And I love what you're saying, because another way of describing what you said was I went to a Buddhist temple once and I heard a man, a monk, do a talk. It was a beautiful talk. He was talking about acceptance. He said, the moment, I'll never forget it, this line stood out so beautifully to me. The moment you accept, healing starts. The moment you accept, healing starts. That's what you're talking about right there, mate. It's beautiful. And I also love what you were talking about at the beginning. It's something that I feel is a real crux of the problem of psychology. When I say psychology, I'm talking about, I'm going to be more specific. I feel is the crux of suffering, should I say. No, forget that first bit. When I remember speaking to a lady from South Africa, she was an Orthodox Jewish lady, and she was going on about the Palestinians. Palestinians, you know, on our land. And she was so upset with them. Terrorists, this, that, and the other. And I remember saying to her, well, you know, old saying, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. You know, the Palestinians are fighting for what they believe in. The Israelis are fighting for what they believe in. These are two different realities coming to blows. Each thinks that they are true. I said, but there will never be any peace as long as that attitude is taken. They'll never find peace. You'll never find peace in war. Peace is not found by shooting and bombing and going to war. You cannot achieve peace with war. It's impossible. You only achieve war with war. You only achieve suffering and destruction with war. Peace isn't brought about with war. War and suffering is brought about with war. And I said, but do you not see this is what you do to yourself? You go to war with your own mind. You have a thought and you suffer it. And then you go to war with that thought. Your mind goes to war with itself. You are at war with yourself. You are at war with your own mind. This is why people end up in such states of depression and suffering, because they go to war with their own mind. And Mum hates this. Forgive me, Mum. She hates this. But in a physical sense, you could say it's like motor neurons disease. The body that attacks itself. It's almost like a motor neurons disease within the mind. Apart from it's not a disease, it's a misunderstanding. And it's like, there is a very, very, very specific time when peace emerges. And it isn't during the war, it's the moment people take the guns and they go, it's over. It's not that we've achieved peace at that time. Peace is the natural emergent from that moment. Peace is the consequence of putting down the weapons and ceasing the war. It's exactly the same with the mind. The moment we fall, if acceptance, whatever you want to call it, the moment that acceptance is found, oh, fucking hell, do you know what? I'm just in a bad mood today. Are we allowed just to be in a bad mood without the judgment? Of course we are. Are we allowed to feel anxious without the judgment? Of course we are. Are we allowed to feel like we're having a shit day without the judgment? Of course we are. It's the judgment that keeps it alive. It's the going to war with ourselves and suffering created along with it. Peace only emerges when we put down the war. We stop fighting because there really is nothing to fight. There's nothing to fight. There's no thought or feeling we need to fight. It's all fine. There's no wrong thoughts. There's no wrong feelings. Paul, you've got your hand up, mate.
I don't know how to go into this without putting specifics on, so I don't know if we can stop recording, if that's possible.